Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist depression and investigate alternative ways of living for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM, your local community radio station. My name is Andy and I will be with you for the next hour, and we are broadcasting on Yagara and Turrbal country. And today on the show, we're going to be looking a little bit into the future, a couple of weeks, to the Ethical Futures for People and Planet conference, which is being organised by the Australian Earth Laws Association and the Australian Association for Professional and Applied Ethics. Both of them are getting together with a whole bunch of other people, a lot of different folks who are going to be presenting talks on different topics. They're going to get together at Griffith University on the weekend of May Day, first weekend of May, and they're going to talk about what to them are the big issues about the ethics of how we should live, and in particular how we should live in relation to the natural world that surrounds us and sustains us. And so it's quite a different breadth of topics that are covered, and over the years, I've seen this event come up and different things that are organised by these organisations, and they're quite interesting topics, but not so many people know about them. And so I've thought it'd be good to talk one year to have a chat to some of the people about what's going on at this kind of conference. And so today on the show, we'll hear from Michelle Maloney, who is from the Australian Earth Laws Alliance. We'll talk to her about this conference and its significance, and also her own interest in the rights of the moon and the ethics of space exploration. And we'll also hear from Hugh Breakey, who I interviewed mostly about his talk about the legitimacy of AI in human decision-making processes, whether we'll be able to sustain the kind of social contracts that we have between humans if AI was inserted into them. Of course, an interesting topic at the moment. I also spoke to Larelle Bossi about the importance of discussing ethics publicly, and also her own talk about nature-positive policies and about how we should factor in human-nature connections into them. So that's what's coming up. We'll be doing a bit of a deep dive into some of these topics. And, of course, if you do want a much deeper dive, there is the Earth Futures Summit, which is happening at Griffith Uni. It does, like a lot of these conferences, the tickets are not super cheap, but it's a couple of days of lots of interesting people, and I think they cater all your meals and everything like that as well. And to hear more about it, let's hear from Michelle Maloney.
My name's Michelle Maloney, and I'm the national convener of a not-for-profit organisation called the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, or AILA.
We are going to be talking about the conference run by AILA, but let's start off with, what is the Australian Earth Laws Alliance?
So AILA was born about a decade ago, and we're a very small not-for-profit. We focus on providing education and advice, as well as support for advocates who want to shift the system to be much more earth-centred. Now, the way we do that is we've been working with lots of different folks over many years, trying to explore what things like rights of nature or legal personhood for nature can look like in Australia. And in Australia, it's a very different context to, say, places like Europe, because what we have in Australia is a colonial legacy legal system, meaning Aboriginal peoples have their own legal system and have had it for a very long time. And it's an excellent example of ecocentric law. So in Australia, the legal system that we inherited from the British, when the British colonised the continent, is very human-centred. It sees nature simply as property. So a lot of the work we do is helping people understand the difference between a legal system that's just seeing nature as property versus what a living legal system looks like. So to do that, we work in partnership with some amazing Indigenous people, Indigenous elders and others who share Indigenous first laws, a system of law that is built on the uniqueness of country, of local places, and then we explore what that could look like in modern day Australia as well. And a lot of that turns into ideas around bioregional law, and respecting ecosystems in a completely different way. Other things we do, we kind of auspiced the birth of a different entity, New Economy Network Australia, NENA, and what we do through that network is it's got lots of different folks from all around Australia connected to it. It's a volunteer-led network, and quick plug, it's got its 2-year conferences in October this year at the Gold Coast, and it will be excellent. But Ayla was concerned about how we would try to communicate and share with folks a different way of looking at economic systems. So instead of just blindly following a kind of a growth-oriented capitalism system, actually exploring all the different ways that everyday folk make the economy through the decisions and the actions that we do, and how we can make that more compassionate towards the earth and the places that we live. So that's sort of 2 examples, like exploring what different legal systems already look like in Indigenous and other communities, and then exploring what it could look like in Australia. So we do a lot of education work and a lot of imaginative work, and we partner with lots of different folks across universities and other NGOs. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we do.
And Ayla also have your own conference coming up in a couple of weeks' time, the first weekend of May. Can you tell us a bit about that conference?
Yes, and thanks for the interest. And firstly, I really want to acknowledge that Ayla is running this conference in partnership with another non-government entity, AAPAE, the Australian Association for Professional and Applied Ethics. And so the conference is called Ethical Futures for People and Planet, and it's being held here in Brisbane from the 1st of May to the 3rd of May, so Thursday, Friday and Saturday, 1st, 2nd and 3rd of May at the Griffith Eco Centre. And the reason we're hosting this event is that one aspect of Ayla's work is that we're interested in the ethical frameworks people use to make decisions, to guide their daily actions. And of course, what we're interested in is how people might factor in nature and the living world in all of their decision making, and I guess their moral framework for what they do, the harm they cause or don't cause, things like that. So that's Ayla's sort of rationale, and we're excited to work with AAPAE and be hosting that at Griffith University. We haven't hosted an ethics conference for a couple of years, so we've had 2 previous Earth ethics events which were really fantastic and bring some pretty cool people out to play together.
So it's quite a breadth of subjects and speakers that are going to be at this conference. Can you tell us what kind of things will be covered and what kind of people are speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're really excited about the program. So we had a couple of keynote people that we invited, and the rest of the speakers are people who put in proposals when we did our call out. So we've got a really excellent mix of people. So on day 1, we're starting with a really important plenary panel featuring Indigenous elders and thinkers, Mary Graham, Anne Polina and Yin Paradise. And we'll be looking at the relationalist ethos, which Elder Mary Graham, and she's an adjunct professor at UQ as well. She's a wonderful and well-known thinker and writer about Indigenous governance systems and how incredible structures can be built around the relationalist ethos that supports all people and all living things. So that'll be a really great session. We've also got keynotes from Chile, a gentleman called Ricardo Rozzi, and he'll be talking about the ethics of co-inhabitation for biocultural conservation. And we've also got a wonderful academic from ANU, Katie Steele, who's talking about sustainability in a broken world. And then on the final plenary session on the third day, we've got a colleague who we've worked with before in AILA. Her name is Katie Guersden from the US, looking at colonialism in climate and conflict and care. In our plenary sessions, we've also got an amazing acoustic ecologist and wildlife sound recording guru, Andrew Skiok, and his sessions about deep listening to nature. So they're the kind of the keynotes, but across the 3 days, we've got, I think, almost 40 or 50 speakers across 3 breakout sessions. We have topics like artificial intelligence, earth laws and earth philosophy, ethics in law and policy and government, topics as broad as multi-species justice and examples from different places around the world. Lots of different topics: health and population, ethics in business, energy transitions, a number of great sessions looking at how we can learn from nature through deep listening and sort of practices of supporting biodiversity even in suburbia. So some really excellent conversations in there. I'm just looking at the program, and even I'm continue to be surprised at how cool they all are.
So the format is a bit like an academic conference, I suppose, but yeah, I guess maybe the topics are a bit more free-ranging than some places. Do you think that's true, that people have a bit more space to bring out maybe some more esoteric kind of topics?
Well, yeah, I mean, in a conference, most normal conference structures are fairly like what we've done, which is, you start with everyone together in a room in the plenary sessions, and we're all listening to interesting speakers who've got accomplishments and papers and experience under their belt, and then we go into breakout sessions where, again, we have people with excellent knowledge and research and such. So the structure is definitely very similar to any other conference you'd go to, but yeah, the call out that we did invited both academic papers but also people involved in practitioner work, meaning, anyone from any part of daily life thinking about the ethics that they use. For example, there are folks from the business world who are coming to talk about how ethics is so important in their day-to-day life. It could be social enterprises or in strategic development for their enterprise. We've got a number of students giving papers, and we have people who are activists working everywhere from supporting rainforest protection in Ecuador to others who are involved in local and community work. So yeah, there is a diversity. I think it's a good mix. There are typical kind of talking heads kind of stuff where people will talk at people giving a paper, but if you're, the whole point of conferences to me are to meet the lovely people who are coming, to listen to some of the information and knowledge, and then to grow your own networks by interacting with new ideas and new people. So hopefully that's what our conference will achieve, and really inspire people not just to think differently but to think about ethics. We don't have really high-level public-facing conversations about ethics very often in our world. Our governments seem to run things like a 3-year, very vague business plan. We don't talk about the really important stuff a lot of the times in government or public-facing debates. So it's events like this that I think really help people dig a little deeper into the good stuff.
So let's talk a bit about your own presentation that you're going to do, which is about space exploration and the rights of the moon. Can you give us a bit of an intro to it?
Yeah, well, look, it's kind of it's almost like a personal passion. A lot of my day-to-day work within AILA is very much focused on terrestrial things on this continent, because that I was approached a couple of years ago, and myself and 3 other people were involved in responding to concerns that a number of people in our networks have to the escalation of the space economy, as some people call it. So long story short, I have to preface, I am not an expert on space exploration whatsoever, but work with a wonderful Australian-based space archaeologist called Alice Gorman, and another rights of nature lawyer and expert, Mari Margul from the US. And so what happened is we drafted a declaration for the rights of the moon and shared it across a whole range of different space agencies, and gave a lot of different panels and conference talks about this issue, trying to raise the profile of the fact that, number one, the space race is happening. It's all dominated by private corporations now, as we know. And in any discussions you hear from people in certain sectors of the space engineering industry and other places, there are very few concerns for what we would call the health of entities like the moon. It's all focused on resource extraction and what can we get out of it, and how can we, get to the moon and dig for minerals or dig for water, and what we're concerned about is the complete lack of knowledge and humility in the face of massive potential change to these places. So I'm mostly giving a talk about the work we did to create the Declaration for the Rights of the Moon, because there was another gentleman who's giving a talk on space, and I wanted to make sure that we got a chance to talk about the moon in that session. So I've also been working recently with a couple of young students from the USA who are also worried about the sheer volume of space debris, whether it be satellites going up there or all other manner of things. So it just seemed a good opportunity to talk about the ethics of space exploration, what people are planning for the moon. And it's, strangely enough, people are so used to a development and extractivist mindset on planet Earth that it's often hard for them to even understand how colonialised we still are and what we do. But showing people the blatant disregard people have for the moon through these endeavours to go there and to dig up the water and do other things, when we really don't even understand how the moon's surface operates, it's actually a really great way to highlight that we are still locked in this mentality of colonising spaces and using them up regardless of our right to do so. And look, finally, I'm a passionate lover of the moon. I'm out there every night watching her and admiring her and watching her cycles, and I have always just loved looking up at the moon, and I'm horrified when I dig around in the details of what people think they can do to her in my lifetime. So that's a very long answer, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've thought about this myself recently, actually, that especially if you read these kind of long-termist kind of techno prophets, they have these visions of mass, space colonization, and it's this thing that space for so often was such a source of wonder for us here on Earth, just these incredible distances and the beauty of it and things like that, and the way that gets stripped away. And I think that possibly it kind of parallels the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when sort of nature was losing its wonder and just becoming this thing to be, extracted.
The attitudes people have to what they think they're allowed to do to the moon, to meteorites, to Mars, it's shocking to me. And even just calling that out often can help people sort of stop for a moment and go, oh, right, so there's all these people planning to do this stuff. What right do we have? And who's going to have a say over some of that? So, for example, the moon, literally, and we mentioned this in the Declaration for the Rights of the Moon, acknowledging its role in all of humanity and all of life on Earth's evolution, because Earth is Earth, and its tides, its activities, everything is connected to the moon, and just the idea that people think they can turn up there and start digging about, wrecking the joint, building on it. I just can't imagine a generation of humans or any other species looking up at the moon and seeing, buildings up there or billboards or waste dumps. It just seems like sacrilegious to me and completely unnecessary. I mean, then there's the whole other conversation about the resources that are needed to be pulled out of this planet to take us to other places. On one hand, too, I remember one space expert saying, look, in reality, humanity is probably going to kill itself through climate change before it has the technology to really get up there and do much. And I didn't find a lot of comfort in that idea, but it absolutely, yes, it highlights and demonstrates this mindset that some, not all, some humans have, that everything out there is for us. And this brings us back to the essence of what Earth laws and ALA and ecocentrism is all about. It's shifting that perspective and saying, well, actually, I'm just one humble member of the living community on this planet. And number one, I should look after this planet. And looking through deep time, I'm just a blip in a moment of time. All my molecules in my body have come from the earth somewhere else and will return to it. What right do I have to wreck the joint or destroy species or dig up the regolith on the surface of the moon? The mindset humanity has guides our actions, and to me, the Eurocentric mentality that then colonised the earth for 500 years has caused so much of the harm we have today, that challenging that very mindset and slowing down these ideas about endless extractivism is at the heart of what we have to do if we're going to survive the next few generations of humanity.
Yeah, and I guess it does. I mean, it's big shifts in consciousness that you're talking about in how we think about ethics and laws. And I suppose the moon is one. Even, I guess, a lot of our notion of rights is based, if not in human consciousness, at least in life as we understand it. And I guess something like space, where we're like, well, there's nobody there. There's no life there, or something like that.
Well, yes. I mean, to me, in one panel, when I was actually joined with other people who know much more about space exploration than me, but I actually had to challenge a male space engineer because he said something that made me then respond by going, look, how do we know we're not going to cause harm? There are examples in books like Dark Emu, written by Bruce Pascoe, that show that when Europeans or the British came to Australia, they took their horses and stock across certain patches of country, fields and other, and destroyed soils and kinds of crops, plants and such that people were using to live, and they didn't even know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were. They didn't know they were causing harm. If people from this planet can go to new places on this planet and really destroy things without even knowing what they're doing in the first couple of years, then imagine the harm we could actually cause to a system we know very little about, no matter what people think. And I think it's that hubris, that idea that we're in control, that we know everything there is to be done, that we can minimise harm. That's what shocks me. I think that lack of humility, a little bit of grace in the face of systems that just aren't ours to destroy. And that kind of humility should be used everywhere on planet Earth as well. So whether it's space exploration or the loss of biodiversity or, the impact of pollution, all of these issues come back to being aware of our impacts and trying to rein in that weird hunger that some of our peoples and some of our cultures have to just keep eating it all up.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Michelle, for having a yarn with us today.
Thanks for the time and thanks for being interested in the conference. We still have a few tickets left. People would like to join us. So check out the program if you do want to come along and learn a little bit more or connect with other good people. Thanks for your time, Andy.
You are listening to 4ZZZ, listening to Michelle Maloney. She was talking a bit about the rights to the moon and space exploration, but we are in general covering the Ethical Futures for People and Planet Summit, which is happening in our city of Brisbane in a few weeks' time. I thought it was a good chance to dig into some of the things people are exploring at this conference, and so next up, we're going to hear from Larelle Bossi, who is also part of helping to put it all together, and we'll also be doing a talk at it. Let's have a listen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Larelle Bossi. I work for the Institute for Ethics, Governance and Law at Griffith University, but I'm actually based down on the island of Tasmania.
And we are talking about the upcoming Ethical Futures Conference, and we heard from Michelle Maloney about the Australian Earth Laws Association, but you are also part of the organisation that is helping to run it, which is the Association of Professional Applied Ethics. Can you tell us a bit about what your organisation does?
Yeah, so the Australian Association for Professional and Applied Ethics, and I believe you're going to also be talking with Hugh, who's actually the chair. We are an organisation of ethicists, professional ethicists and academic ethicists or moral philosophers who come in from various industries. So we hold a conference yearly. We have a publication, Rio, that comes out almost yearly. It's supposed to be coming out yearly. That delves into those really hard ethical dilemmas and questions around organisational ethics and professional ethics. So that could be across, the medical sciences. It could be within developing blue economies, for example, which is some of the work that I do. It could be within veterinary science or just, corporate structures. There's a bunch of areas that we all pull from. We're a diverse bunch.
In general, I guess everybody has some kind of ethical framework they use for making decisions that they have acquired from various inputs over their lifetime. But I guess this kind of systematic kind of analysis of ethics is not something that's done very much in our mainstream kind of media discourse. Do you think it could be done better?
100%. Absolutely, I do. And I think a lot of the time it's what's lacking in a lot of our political debates. It's often, I think, what's lacking in, corporate industry structures, as well as, dialogues around stakeholdership. We're in a world of crisis right now. Doesn't matter where you turn, whether it's health, education, it's kind of everywhere, and I think a lot of the ethical dialogue would be really helpful in navigating this very messy space we're finding ourselves in right now.
Well, let's talk about the upcoming Earth Futures Conference, which you are a part of.
Yeah.
Just briefly, why do you think it's important to have a conference like this?
So the ethical futures for people and planet, I think to look at it from what I've already mentioned is that we have crisis points. We have an environmental crisis. We have species disappearing off our planet every day. We have, like I said, health sector issues, NDIS, aged care. There's a bunch of big problems, I think, facing Australia today and the world. They're both global issues. They're also domestic issues and community issues. And I think this is just a slightly different lens that we can put on it. So a lot of the times you have science conferences or you have business conferences or you have engineering conferences that are all trying to look for futures within that particular lens, through data or through innovation. And I think an ethical lens is a really important one because I think we're in a really interesting point right now where we have an opportunity to think about what kind of future we want, and therefore, gear our innovation, gear our businesses, gear our political viewpoints to what kind of ethical futures we actually want. And that's getting really clear on the kind of values that we have. What kind of values we have for our communities, for our environment, our relationship to that, and the way that then holds to account our political perspectives, companies, the kinds of companies that we're wanting to support versus perhaps not support. So I think this is just an opportunity for us to take the lens from a values-driven perspective to say, okay, well, what is it that we want? What is it that we do value, and how we value, and how that might make a real difference in the kind of future that we're looking towards.
And your talk that you're going to do at the conference is going to be on how human and nature connections are needed to create nature-positive policies. Do you want to give us a bit of a brief spiel of what your talk will be about?
I think the Global Nature Positive Summit in 2024, so just last year, has got me thinking, I think, more about the positive or nature positive messaging and the way in it's extremely dependent on metrics and, various either environmental or economic metrics that we use when we think about ideas of sustainability and what nature positive really means. And so I'm going to be, just as I've previously said, looking at a more ethical lens on what nature positive really does look like. And I guess I'm going to be thinking about what I would call a biocultural ethics. So really looking at that relationship between, humans and nature and delving into how our lens might want to consider that relationship as a driving guide or a driving post, which is slightly perhaps different to what the data metrics and the economic metrics, may have us think. So that's what I'm going to be discussing.
And how would you contrast that with how the Nature Positive Summit, and Tanya Plibersek's kind of nature positive policy, how would you contrast it with how it has played out so far?
I think nature positive is a really nice idea. And I think at the moment it's an ideology. I think it's really difficult to get to when we think about ideas of conservation versus technologies that we're trying to develop. So when we're thinking about renewables and the development of renewables, which is great in terms of addressing our climate crisis and our carbon footprint, but what does that mean for the conservation of, biodiversity? What does that mean for the displacement of species or the disruption to migration routes? So we've already seen how we've got these tensions arising between conservation and technology. And I think nature positive is saying, well, how do we actually overcome this kind of tension and these very real issues? And those have played out already in Queensland, and we're seeing them play out along the entirety of our coastlines across Australia. And I think there are ways to do that innovatively here in Australia, and we need to be looking at what that biocultural lens, I think, really looks like. So how do we move towards something that's working together, as opposed to only bringing forth the conflict? So that's really my focus.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Larelle, for having a chat with us today.
No problem. Thank you very much, Andy.
We were speaking to Larelle Bossi from the Australian Association of Professional and Applied Ethics about the upcoming Ethical Futures for People and Planet conference. And the final person I spoke to about it is Hugh Breakey, who's also involved in that organisation, and we'll be doing a talk at the conference about AI and legitimacy when it comes to ethics, and I thought that's a good topic to delve into, so I had a chat with Hugh about it. Let's have a listen.
So my name is Hugh Breakey. I am a Principal Research Fellow and Deputy Director of the Institute for Ethics, Governance and Law at Griffith University, and I'm also the President of the Australian Association for Professional and Applied Ethics. So
your own talk at the conference is quite a pertinent topic of ethics at the moment, talking about artificial intelligence. The title you've given it is Flesh and Blood Legitimacy. Are human beings replaceable parts of legitimate decision-making systems? It's a very interesting topic. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what you'll be talking about?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is a paper I'm working on with a colleague down at Macquarie University, Professor Paul Formosa, and in it, what we're looking at is the legitimacy of things that are happening. And as I move through my career in being an ethicist, I've started to drift away from focusing on ethics and instead focusing on legitimacy. And the reason for that is that, especially when we teach ethics as a philosophical subject at university, what it can get people to start thinking is to sit back in their armchair and think about a particular issue and work out what the right thing to do, what the good thing to do in that particular case is. And that's really valuable, and it's an important skill that people have, and it's something that one way or another we all do for ourselves as we live our lives. But the problem is that then that view on what I think should happen, what would be the right thing to do in this case, it needs to play out in the real world. And the real world is a complicated place with lots of things going on that impact on what's happening. Every situation has a particular context, and it has a particular history, and there may be expectations wrapped up with that history. There would be agreements that have been made. There have been undertakings that people have given, and they're all complicating factors. And then we have this other problem, which is that all these other people in the world are also deciding what they think is right. And it's almost always the case that what they think is right isn't exactly what I think is right. And then I have to work out, okay, well, what do I do now? What do we do now if we need to move forward in this imperfect world where we all kind of agree and kind of disagree with each other, and we need to have a way forward that still seems morally right, even if it's not what we thought was morally right when we were just sitting in our armchair imagining what we wanted to do. And so the way that human beings tend to solve these problems is we look to what I'll call legitimacy factors rather than ethical factors. So we work out, okay, we all kind of disagree on this issue, but is there some way we can move forward on it? Is there some way we can come together as a group and work out what would be fair enough? And often that's going to be a lower standard than what's right. It's going to be, look, what can we all live with here? And it might involve extra things happening. It might involve processes. Maybe we'll say, look, we all need to get together and talk about this. Maybe we need to have a vote on it. Maybe there's some other way that we can move forward here in a way where none of us will get exactly what we want, but all of us will get something that's good enough and that treats us respectfully. And so when I'm saying, is it going to be legitimate, the things that happen when we move AI in, the point that's going on here is that all around the world, lots of little things happen to us, big or small. We're involved in lots and lots of interactions. And the results of them are often things that we're willing to go along with, that we're willing to say, yeah, look, I'll accept it. Why? Well, because it's fair, because I agree, because it was what was expected, because we all got together and talked about it, because there was a fair enough process. All of these little things that we do are ways of solving problems in the real world that let us all travel on with our lives and accept the things that are happening to us, but also will give us some information about when we shouldn't accept the things that are happening to us and when we think that, no, actually, this is illegitimate, this isn't okay. And so most of the systems that we've developed over time are human-built and human-staffed. They're made up of human beings who we interact with and who make decisions that impact on us. Maybe they're in government, maybe they're in commercial organisations, maybe they're in NGOs. And there's lots of ways that human beings can contribute to making these things legitimate or illegitimate. And then the question we're asking is, okay, imagine a world that's not too far away, maybe just a few years away, where instead of having lots and lots of those decisions by the professional that we engage with, by the lawyer or the doctor that we engage with, or by the public service when we're interacting with government on some matter, or by the police force, instead of having those institutions being seen as legitimate because there were human beings doing particular things in them, can we trade out some of those human beings and instead put in AI decision makers or decision proposers or human augmenters or however it plays out? And are they still going to be met with the same type of response that human beings are going to give? And they're going to say, okay, I can see how this decision was made. I can see what humans did, and I can see the role that the AI might have played. And I'm still going to recognise that that's okay, even if that decision goes against me, that it's all right. And it's not an easy question to work out exactly when people are going to be accepting of the role of an AI and when they're not going to be accepting. And what our paper is trying to do is tease them out from a moral perspective and go, okay, we have lots of good ways of creating legitimacy that are out there in the world that have been developed by sensible and constructive humans for a long time. What happens when we start putting AI into them AI is probably going to do some things much, much better, and that's going to be great. And it's probably going to do some things worse, and there's probably going to be some things that humans do that the AI simply cannot do. And for them, we need to be really wary about swapping that human with the AI, because it's just not going to be able to play the role that the human wants it to do.
The techno-optimists out there, and in fact the AI companies as well who make money off it, are very optimistic, I guess, about AI's ability to assess data better than humans can. But I suppose in any kind of social decision-making, humans, we're not necessarily rational data assessors. Like, the part of it is this kind of empathy for human imperfection or something like that. Is something, I guess, is that kind of what you're getting at, one of the issues that comes up here?
Yeah, it absolutely will be. And it is fair enough when we're discussing these types of things, even if we're not a techno sort of utopian, to recognise that a lot of the systems we have aren't necessarily great. Doing all of the things that a productive and peaceable society does is not an easy task. It's not one that's historically been fulfilled by societies very well. And most of our processes do a pretty good job, given it's not an easy task. But the reality is there's a lot of bad decision making that goes along. There's a lot of poor outcomes. Even think of, say, people who just can't get legal services for the legal problems they have, because there just isn't enough access to lawyers for them to be able to get a lawyer who's going to be able to listen to their concerns and take them seriously and give good advice, because that might just be prohibitively expensive for the person to get that lawyer, and there might be no reliable processes. Some of these will simply fall through the cracks where people just don't have that access to justice that we would want them to have. Now, if AI comes along and says, well, look, I can actually make this stuff really cheap, I can make this very, very available, then we might think, oh, from a penny pinching way to go, I can see that efficiency would be good. But it's not just efficiency. If it is actually getting access to justice and to legal information that can help someone in a context where they would not have been able to afford that information before, that's not just efficient. That's actually an important plus that AI might be able to deliver us. Now, whether it will get to that point at some point is obviously up for grabs, but it's important for us to recognise that there are justice issues on both sides of this equation. It may be that AI will actually help out in some areas where our society just isn't doing very well in our existing system. And, of course, as you say, there's human error. Humans aren't perfect decision makers. We make decisions all the time on the basis of sometimes not quite rational information. We're subject to mood swings. We have other agendas. We're thinking about different things. We're easily distractible. We're not really good at monitoring situations. So we're much better at making decisions and being actively engaged in an environment. But just monitoring stuff that's going along that's mostly very boring, but occasionally really, really needs our attention, that's just something it turns out human beings aren't particularly good at doing. If AI can take over those roles, then it might be much better at that. And if it is much better, then that might have, really good consequences for human beings. So it is a complex question to work out where are human beings failing and where might AI do better in really important ways.
Of course, the big shadow that looms over AI ethics, I guess, is the question of human existential risk. Is that something that you cover in your own studies of it?
Yeah, it is a big question on what the final endpoint of this will be. It probably won't be one we're talking about too much, but it is interesting the way that legitimacy often works is that it flows down. So I might accept a police officer who asks me to, just move along, sir, and shuffles me along, and I might accept that. Not because I respect that person in particular, but because I think that the police are basically doing a good job, and the system of government that we have here is a mostly justifiable and legitimate one. So that the reason I respect the low-level thing is because there's higher-level institutions in play. I believe in the rule of law, all of these sorts of things, and that filters down to the lower-level one. Now, if you have some really big global concerns with AI, if you really think, hang on, existential risk here is actually a significant one. Every time we start advancing AI and we start putting it into our decision-making systems and assimilating it into the way we do things, we are contributing to that larger risk, the risk that something really, really scary and awful might happen in the future. Then that is going to filter down, that sort of global concern. Is AI actually a good thing? And it may be, we may be concerned with killer robots, and that's not a silly concern to have, because these things just are going to wind up being incorporated into war. That's just the reality. But it also may be, well, what happens if we have massive disruptions to our to human employment? So if you have any of those big global concerns with AI, then again, that is going to filter all the way down, and it's going to make me think, well, maybe AI in this situation looks like it would be good, but it's still a small step to a place that we don't want to go. And once we get there, we won't be able to get back to where we are now. So we shouldn't see it as legitimate for those reasons.
All right. Well, thanks very much for chatting with us, Hugh. And I suppose if people want to hear more, they'll have to get along to the conference.
Absolutely. I think there are still a few tickets available. So if people want to come along and listen and have a talk, then they're most welcome.
All right. Thanks, Hugh.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy.
That is Hugh Breakey there from the Association for Professional and Applied Ethics, talking about AI and legitimacy when it comes to ethical decision making. And there'll be lots more talks like that at the Ethical Futures for People and Planet conference, which is happening at Griffith Uni from May 1st to May 3rd. You can check it out at the website earthlaws.org.au, where they also organise webinars semi-frequently. The next one is actually on April 24 and is about exploring bioregioning. Lots of great events happening across our city and the world. That is all we have time for on The Paradigm Shift. I love bringing these different events from across our city, people that are out there trying to make a better world, and it's so good to be able to share what they are doing on this show. So do keep tuning in. See you next week.